Watching the full view, lots of feedback coming through on our special live broadcast with co-presenter Stephen Grootes, who's out on the streets of Johannesburg engaging the homeless, not far from the SABC in Auckland Park. Let's hear more from him. Stephen?
So Peaceful, thank you very much indeed. Well, the temperature beginning to drop here tonight. A forecast low of 3 degrees Celsius on the streets of Auckland Park, and the centre of one of Africa's richest cities, and yet so many people living here who are largely ignored. You've heard the stories of Jabu, Thomas, Mpo and Sibusiso. We'll hear more from them in a few moments, but let's speak to some of the people who try to help the people who are homeless living on the streets of Joburg tonight. And joining me now, Mandisa Kanile is a member of an organisation called Rise Up Against Gender Abuse. We've spoken only to young men here tonight, but young women and teenage girls are particularly vulnerable in these circumstances. Xolani Fihle is a spokesperson for the Johannesburg Metropolitan Police Department. I'll put the question around burning blankets to him in a moment. And Tebogo Morake is also from the Johannesburg Metropolitan Police Department, but she is in charge of their youth development programs. So that is the conversation that you're going to see now. Mandisa, let me start with you. Good evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on the streets of Joburg on this edition of The Full View. If you drive around Johannesburg and here in this broadcast, you will only find young men. Where are the young women who are in exactly the same position?
The young women are also on the street, but they actually come out at night, specifically because a lot of them engage in sex work in order to survive. If they're not engaging in sex work with the fellow homeless, who are, one, giving them protection, two, a warm blanket at night, and three, also they are involved in the drug trade as well, so they also share drugs. But over and above that, there are these small sort of like shelter situations where individuals have taken them in. They charge them a 10 or 50 rand a day in order for them to have a bath or a place to sleep. But a lot of them definitely do come out in the evening. If you go to a couple of street corners within Hillbrow and on N Street in Johannesburg, you'll find them that they're there, they're available. A lot of them, some are there through mental illness, some are there through obviously addiction, and a lot of them are there because they are homeless and sex work is the only way that they can survive.
So when you talk about sex work, who are the customers? And I'm presuming by and large it's elderly men. Older men, I mean.
Of course it's older men. It's men who work around the CBD. They also fellow homeless who've gone and hustled through the streets, and now they're looking to get relief at the end of the day in a warm body. And those are what the conditions that these girls live under on a daily basis.
They must be incredibly vulnerable.
Incredibly vulnerable. I don't even want to talk about the violence, the missing bodies. I'm sure you're aware that 400 unidentified bodies every single day in South Africa enter a morgue. And a lot of those are displaced persons, homeless persons, and a lot of them are girls as well. So they get murdered on the streets because if, say for example, they say no, what are their options? And if they go missing, nobody looks for them. Nobody tries to find them because they're undocumented. A lot of them are migrant workers, so they're not even documented on the system in this country. So no one will ever know when they go missing.
Where do they come from? And in a way that's part of the story tonight. Everyone comes from somewhere. We've heard so many cases already of inyalpe, of addiction, of people who've tried to study and been able to study to an extent, but no money, no family support on which to fall back on.
Of course, a lot of them come via addiction. A lot of them. They get kicked out of their homes because of the theft situation, because people just don't know what to do with them, because a lot of them have been put in and out of rehabilitation by their families, so their families eventually give up on them. There are those that are there on the street because mental illness is something we really don't deal with. So because they can't be put in a facility, they end up roaming the streets of Johannesburg or other urban cities just trying to survive. And then others are actually migrant workers who did come through to South Africa for a better life, were unable to find that better life and end up on the streets trying to hustle.
When a young woman is on the street in that situation, do they stay on the street forever? I mean, is that what happens? Do they literally get old on the street and die there?
Unfortunately, some do get old on the streets and die. Some manage to get through rehabilitation facilities. Some do manage to pick up their lives. Unfortunately, we do lose a lot of them to either overdoses or unfortunately they get killed.
And they get killed by men?
They get killed by men.
All right, we're going to talk more about that. Tebogo Morake, you're from the Joburg Metro Police, but you're from their Youth Protection Services. What services do you offer to people in this situation?
We normally provide programs for young people within the city of Joburg. A lot of our young people, it's young people who are unemployed, fresh from school. They're looking for a lot of opportunities in terms of bursaries, internships, learnerships. So that's basically what we provide. We also go to schools where we are approached by various schools. Teachers are saying we are up to here, we don't know what to do. Young people are harassing us, young people are killing us, young people are disrespectful, young people are selling drugs. So it's a serious crisis that teachers are facing at school, including young people themselves, because they do not know where to go, how to tackle certain situations or challenges that are facing. So we'd have programs such as your prison tour program, where we take them to a prison facility and show them harsh realities of prison, because a lot of our young people have misconceptions about prison, to say it's a 5-star hotel, and we take them there, especially in winter time, so that they see that it's not a holiday, it's not your mother's home. So you have to take your life serious, because it starts by a small thing like smoking cigarette at school. That's where you end up.
So you reckon there's a line from cigarettes all the way through to Nyalpe?
It starts there, because once you don't have that tolerance to buy a cigarette as a young person, what do? You steal. What do you start by stealing? You start by stealing pens. You steal teachers' cell phones. You go to your home. You steal your mother's items. And then it escalates. You go to Nyawupe, you do all these funny things. That's where you end up. Or it starts by bullying at school. You end up in prison. So we take them there and show them that it's really not a 5-star hotel. To an extent that you get there, you sleep on a concrete cement, not a bed. So it's really harsh in prison. So young people must really make sure that they take care of themselves and they know what they want with their lives.
As the Metro Police, I mean, are you able to provide any shelters? So do the police provide shelters, or do other people do that?
No, it's social development. If I know correctly, it's social development that would provide shelter. Metro Police, no, we don't.
We were hoping to speak to social development tonight, and from what I understand of what the law says, as it's been explained to me today, that social development only under the law are able to look after young people until they turn 18. And most of the people on the street are older than that, and so that means that they don't fall under social development, or at least that's how it seems to be being interpreted for the moment. Mandisa, you were talking about shelters. I mean, do shelters work? And I know around the world people will go into a shelter and then leave it. That seems to be almost universal, whether you're in South Africa or Denmark.
First of all, shelters are spaces of extreme violence. Understand that a lot of women escape those shelters because, one, their pimps are there. The people in the shelters themselves, a lot of them are involved in illicit trade. So you'll find that they are the ones that are actually putting these girls in more vulnerable situations, and they're even safer out on the street. Also, overcrowding is a massive thing. If you have, for example, in Pretoria alone, there's over 6,000 documented homeless people in a shelter that can accommodate a maximum of 100. So how do you expect for that infrastructure to be able to accommodate? So there just isn't enough room, and the shelter system isn't working. Most of the shelters that are funded for DST are for survivors of domestic abuse and not necessarily for individuals that are homeless. Also, in terms of structural housing, you only get accommodated by the state if you are under 18, and also in terms of social housing or free housing, it's over 42. So that particular gap of people between 20 and 40 are completely not accommodated at all by the system.
So it's back to the same old story, the missing middle. How often do we hear that in South African society? Xolani Fichler, spokesperson for the Johannesburg Metropolitan Police, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I do need to tackle you on this issue of police officers coming and burning the blankets of the homeless. Is that official policy?
Good evening, Stephen. Unfortunately, it is a deterrent to stop the vagrants from sleeping under bridges and on the roadway like the boys are doing today. The city bylaws and the National Road Traffic Act doesn't allow for people to actually sleep this close to the road. It's for safety purposes, and we do that to deter them from coming back and sleeping on that place again.
What's wrong with them sleeping where they are? Never mind the law. Surely one should be a bit human about this.
True, and in certain instances we do allow them, but as I said, it's safety. We can't allow them to, if a bus comes at a full speed and the driver loses control, the first place he's going to go through on the pavement and he's going to ride over the gentleman.
It's one thing to take someone's possessions, I mean, for safekeeping, but to burn them?
As I said before, it is a deterrent that...
You couldn't take them to the local police station, leave a note, they can come and collect them?
Unfortunately, they do come collect them and they come back to the same spot. So it's a deterrent for them to not come back. And as my colleague Tebogo said, that we do work with social development. So social development will approach those who are under 18 years and try to find them shelters to stay, but they'll always leave and they'll come back to the street.
Golani, I mean, I realize in a way you're the face of law and order, and that's your unfortunate position in this discussion. But
yes.
Surely there are other places in Joburg that are slightly safer than here, right? The police will know where those are. I mean, does it not make sense to maybe encourage people to move there rather than simply burning their stuff?
We do encourage, Steve, we do encourage them to find better places to stay, but they come back to the same place.
Mandisa, I mean, do you think that there are better places than here in Joburg, safer places than here? No one should sleep under a bridge on a river when it rains, particularly December. I mean, people are literally going to die and be swept away very quickly. But surely, society can find a safer place than this, within the limited resources we have.
The thing is, we just don't have enough shelter infrastructure in this country for all the vulnerable groups. Never mind just homeless persons. Vulnerable groups are just not accommodated. We don't have the money, we don't have the support, etc. And if you remember the Durban flood specifically, 90% of the victims of the Durban flood were homeless people that were sleeping under bridges that got flushed away into rivers, etc. So the infrastructure isn't there, and there isn't political will to actually build it. When last was a new home built for the homeless in this country? Some were pre-1994.
Sure. All right. Kalani, we've got to go to a break in a second. I do want to ask you, so marijuana is legal under the Constitutional Court's ruling, but it has to be on your own property.
Yes.
There's no interpretation of that ruling that I've seen around people who are homeless.
Okay.
At the same time, it seems bizarre to me that just because, I'm rich, I can smoke it at home, and because they're poor, they can't. Is there any interpretation that the Metro Police are able to sort of follow on that?
Concerning us, we're dealing with the law as it said, and it says that you have to smoke it within your own premises. And unfortunately, we do have to attack people who are smoking in public, and especially if it is mixed with narcotics.
All right. Mandisa, I mean, one of the big questions, of course, is what's happened with the families and the fact that we've seen families just broken. I mean, a lot of it, I imagine, if we look at what the demography and the population stats tell us, it'll be about HIV and AIDS. And this is the generation that grew up without their parents as a result of that. But when people, do people try and contact families? Do any of those structures still exist?
The women that we work with, a lot of them are sex workers, young sex workers, and a lot of them say that they actually run away when their families try to find them. Some of them it's through shame. Some of them, you do know that they change physically in terms of how they are, and they don't want their families and friends to see them in that condition. A lot of them are still hurt by the fact that they were kicked out from their homes, etc. And some of them ran away from abuse in those homes in the first place. So you do find a situation where there's a really bad situation, or they don't have a relationship to go back to with their families, and a lot of them are willing to actually die on the street undocumented so that their families don't even know where to find them.
Sure. Tebogo, you were nodding your head as Mandisa was speaking about families there.
Yes, these are the situations that we come across on a daily basis. Some of them do come to our offices at JMPD to say, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go. Some of them have matric, some of them I don't have matric. Here's my CV. Please assist with any program that you might have, as long as I can get out of the streets, as long as I can get, something to buy, whether to buy bread or, put bread on the table. And we do try and assist, because on a yearly basis, JMPD recruits around 150 to 200 young people who are based within our offices to be engaged in an activity, to be engaged in experiential learning for a period of 12 months. At the end of 12 months, they get a certificate of qualification, which is something that that they did not have when they joined us 12 months prior. So they would be with us for a period of 12 months, get experience as much as they can. Some are fortunate that at the end of 12 months, we're able to employ them. Some not. But at least when they go out, they do have experience and they do have a qualification with them.
Kalani Fichler from the Metropolitan Police, thank you very much indeed for your time. Tebogo Morake, also from the Metro Police, but from the youth development sector, I do appreciate it. Mandisa Kanile, thank you very much indeed for Rise Up Against Gender Abuse. When we come back to Piso in a moment, we're going to speak to Jabu Thomas Mpo and Sibusiso. We're going to ask them if they could, what would they do with their lives? If they could get off the street tonight, where would they go? Piso, over to you. We'll be back with that in a moment.